Thank you, Mario. So with this presentation, Mario and I will focus on how the UPC Court of Appeal is assessing inventive step as illustrated by the recent decisions in Amgen versus Sanofi and Edwards versus Merrill. For the records, I just want to add that the court had already signaled a similar approach, at least in nanostring, back in February 2024. But now the head note of this decision clearly said the so-called holistic approach. It is also worth noting that both decisions were released on the same day, 25 November 2025, despite arising in entirely different technical fields. So as Florian anticipated, Edwards involves a medical device patent, specifically for a prosthetic heart valve system, while Amgen concerns a biotechnology patent on cholesterol-lowering antibody drugs, which Amgen markets as Repata. So the fact that the court issued this decision simultaneously sends a clear message, we think. The UPC is establishing an approach to inventive step, ensuring consistency across different technical areas. The approach will be better illustrated by Mario, but we can anticipate that it somehow recalls more holistic approaches used, for example, in Germany and UK, but we can say departs from the problem solution approach used by the European Patent Office. Next slide, please. That, as we know, is followed in some jurisdiction, for example, in Italy for sure, but also in France or in the Netherlands. So before turning to the UPC approach, it is useful to briefly say the three main steps of the EPO problem solution approach. I know it's well known to many of you, but let's see. So the first step is determining the closest prior art. Importantly, this is not merely a reference point, but you want to select the most promising starting point for for the development of leading to the invention. Choosing the closest prior art correctly frames the skilled person perspective and sets the whole context of the inventive step evaluation. The second step, as we know, is establishing the objective technical problem, which is formulated on the basis of the differences between the closest prior art and the claimed invention. The third and last step is considering whether the claimed invention would have been obvious to the skilled person. Here, it's important to stress that it's not sufficient that the skilled person could have arrived at the invention. So the key question is whether they would, for example, based on a pointer or a motivation to combine.
Hang up for once.
Have done so in view of the objective technical problem.
Is that the doggy is got some kind.
Sorry. This distinction between could and would is central in the EPO problem solution approach to preventing insight reasoning, for example, and it ensures that obviousness is assessed from the perspective of the skilled person. Now, to illustrate the holistic UPC approach, I will hand over to Mario. Mario, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. So let's dive into the UPC Court of Appeal holistic approach. Basically, the assessment is organized around three core steps. The first one, which is clearly different from the EPO problem solution approach, is to define the objective problem, focusing on what the invention adds to the state of the art viewed through the eyes of the skilled person at the priority date. The second is one of more realistic starting point in the prior art, which we will see are documents that the skilled person would generally consider when trying to solve the problem. And third is the could-would approach, which is almost identical to the EPO problem solution approach. So asking whether the skilled person would, not merely could have arrived at the claim invention based on pointers, motivation, and reasonable expectation. Keep in mind, this is not a rigid checklist, but more holistic and context-driven analysis. In the Court of Appeal decision, it's interesting to highlight that they clearly say that national courts have various different approaches and use different guidelines. And despite the differences, the EPO problem solution approach, the UPC holistic approach, they say the Court of Appeal says that all of these could be merely guidelines, but in the end, they should probably lead to the same conclusion. Let's go to the first, the objecting problem. So the first step. What is the definition of the objective problem? The problem must be identified, of course, from the perspective of the skilled person at the priority date and based on the common general knowledge. Crucially, the court stresses the fact that the objective problem is not derived by dissecting individual claim features, but looking at the claim as a whole in its technical context. What matters is what the invention adds to the state of the art, taking into account the inventive concept, and of course, in the formulation of the objective problem, the problem must not contain pointer to avoid hindsight to the claim solution. As far as the realistic starting points, the court then moved to the second step. A starting point is considered realistic if its teaching would have been of interest to the skilled person who is trying to solve the objective problem. This may be the case where the prior art already addresses the same or similar underlying problem or discloses several features relevant to the claim invention. Importantly to know, there may be more than one realistic starting point, and the invention must be inventive over each of them. This is, in my view, a significant strategic point, especially in revocation action. The third step is the could-would approach, could-would analysis. I would say with a flavor, with a UPC flavor. The court, of course, emphasizes that the question is not whether the skilled person could have arrived at the invention, but whether they would have done so. Importantly, the Court of Appeal highlights that the skilled person is assumed to have no inventive skills and no imagination, and they require a concrete pointer or motivation to take the next step. In the Merrill decision, there is a specific clarification. Inventive step does not require a technical improvement over the prior art. The court explicitly states that an invention may be inventive even if it represents a non-obvious alternative to known solution. This makes a clear departure from arguments that often we hear that rely solely on the absence, in order to declare the lack of inventive step, on the absence of a measurable improvement. Whereas in Amgen Sanofi, we in the Amgen-Sanofi decision, the Court of Appeal concentrates more on this reasonable expectation of success. The claim solution is obvious only if the skilled person would have taken the next step in expectation of solving the technical problem. This expectation must be rational, based on a scientific appraisal of the known facts at the priority date, and in particular, always in the Amgen-Sanofi case, where the technical field is unexplored, where uncertainties, risk, or development hurdles exist, the expectation of success is reduced, of course. Crucially, once the patentee substantiates uncertainties, such costs and burdens, then the burden of proof shifts to the revocation plaintiff, the plaintiff in the revocation, to show that they would not have deterred the skilled person from reaching the claimed solution and to solve the problem. So, Sophia, are there differences between the EPO problem solution approach and the UPC holistic approach?
Let's try to summarize this. So this table is basically a summary of what Mario already discussed in detail. So I will not go into the details, but I just want to note that there are for sure some points in common, but in my view, there is an important structural difference between the EPO approach and the UPC approach. So as you can see, under the EPO problem solution approach, the assessment starts from the closest prior art, so determining the closest prior art, and then identifies the differences with the invention in order to formulate the objective technical problem. By contrast, in the UPC approach, it starts from the objective technical problem, and this is based on the invention as a whole. Yeah, and just then it considered the most promising starting points, let's say. So I think this might allow the court to take a more holistic or general view and assessment, so balancing the invention's technical contribution, the skilled person's expectation, and the practical likelihood of success. That were points that were raised in those decisions. So it remains to be seen if, as highlighted by the court in both the decision, the approaches would lead to the same result. And with that said, I think we can go to the next slide, please.
Yeah. So
based on this decision, we can draw some takeaways to draft our patent applications. So I will tell something about takeaways in the draft from the drafting prosecution perspective. First of all, it's important to clearly define the objective technical problem, reflecting the invention contribution to the state of the art, focus on the technical effects of the invention, again, as a whole, rather than just on the technical effects deriving from the differences with the prior art. Also, this decision highlights the importance of presenting non-obvious alternatives. So even if they do not represent an improvement over the prior art, a meaningful differentiation from existing knowledge can strengthen the inventive step argument. And as a last point, for invention in less explored or uncertain technical fields, there is somehow the need to document the scientific uncertainties or technical challenges that the skilled person might face. Because based on what Mario said, demonstrating the absence of a reasonable expectation of success can be critical in supporting non-obviousness. Mario, you might want to add something from the litigation perspective.
From the litigation perspective, sure. So taking together this decision of the Court of Appeal showed that the UPC approach to inventive step is both structured but also flexible and for sure fact-driven. So for patentees, the key, in my view, is to control the narrative around the inventive concept to identify properly, of course, the objective problem and the technical uncertainty around the problem, keeping in mind that no improvements are needed and no obvious choice is enough. Whereas for revocation claimants, success depends on carefully framing the problem, selecting more realistic starting points and demonstrating not just possibility but motivation and predictability, taking into account the skilled person, of course. Ultimately, in my view, the UPC confirms that the inventive step is not just a box ticking exercise, but again, a holistic assessment, a technical contribution.